Kia ora everyone, my name is Hannah Devery and I am here to do my mahi whakahirahira for my behaviour and learning portfolio. You'll just be hearing my voice because I'm recording this through PowerPoint and the video just takes over the slides too much. There's lots of information on them, but hopefully that's okay. Here's a nice little picture of, well, the side of my face, my husband and my son. I thought I'd start today with my pepeha, so tēnā koutou katoa, ki te kai karakia tēnā koutou, e kui mā e koro mā tēnā koutou, ko mō gweddelig te moana, ko avan dyfradwy ngā awa, ko werehi te iwi, ko McGregor, ko Gardner, ko Jones, ko McMahon ngā whānau. I whānau mai au I ko tirana, wera I ngarani, ko raki wera te toi whenua, e noho ana e ahau ki tauranga, he kiako e hau ki tauranga moana, ko Hannah Devery toku ingoa, no te roro, naku te roro, ka ora ai te iwi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. A little quote, so for most people, technology makes things easier. For a person with a disability, it can make things possible, and so assistive technology is all about making the curriculum more accessible and making school life more possible for students with a disability or just that have got struggles with their learning. The reason I chose to do this topic is because there has been a bit of a gap in our cluster around assistive technology. We have quite a few of our referrals end up needing assistive technology trials, and teachers especially, but also some Senkos still don't feel fully confident in completing those trials themselves. And so we end up doing quite a lot of those trials, and the idea behind this is to try and upskill Senko and teachers so that they feel confident to be able to do the trials themselves, and then it's a bit more sustainable. Also to upskill the new RTLB that come through, because we have quite a large team of RTLB in the Bay of Plenty, and so there's always going to be that need to upskill new RTLB in doing assistive technology. And currently in our cluster we don't have a very clear overview for that. I have done had three trials accepted this year, and I've also been on a course through the ministry that was just free on assistive technology trials. So this is a collation of my own research and my own trials and applications, as well as information from the ministry as well. So an overview, what is assistive technology? We're going to be looking at who can apply for assistive technology, what the different types of assistive technology are that you can get, how to assess what technology you should trial, the steps of the process, what a good application looks like. There's a checklist at the end, and then some other key information. So what is assistive technology? It is specialised equipment that students with additional learning needs use in class to increase or improve their ability to participate and learn. An example of this might be a C-pen to help a student with their reading. I've trialled a C-pen once, and I've seen how much improvement it can have. I recommend it though for older students, because you have to be quite precise and have quite good fine motor skills to use them. So yeah, probably year 4 and up, I'd say, for a C-pen, but unless, you've got a particularly good year 3 with fine motor skills. But yeah, so which one of these pictures is assistive technology? It's a bit of a trick question, because they're all assistive technology, anything that assists. Made through technology, even desks and chairs are assistive technology. So who can apply for assistive technology? Apologies for the small writing. This has come directly from the form, the assistive technology form. So either you need to be already under and being supported by Ministry of Education, so having under OARS, under speech language, having behaviour support, blends, ICS. So if you come under any of those, you're automatically able to apply for it. If you're not, though, you can be just receiving additional learning support. So this means you have to have an individual learning plan in place. So that could either be an IEP from the school, or if RTLB are on board, then it can be the CAP or the FBA from the RTLB. It just has to be an individual support plan for the child. They also have to be at least one level below their expected New Zealand curriculum level. And they have to be having ongoing monitoring and support by some sort of school leader, so the SENCO or the Learning Support Coordinator. They also have to be receiving additional adult support, which is something that can kind of stop you from doing the application. And that needs to be a minimum of 2 hours of one-to-one a week support, or 4 hours of small group support a week. So that's basically either almost an hour a day of small group support. This is on top of your regular day-to-day classroom support, or half an hour a day basically of one-to-one TA support. So that's why it's quite helpful if an RTLB is on board and we can apply for teacher aid support to support the trial of the technology and to make up some of those hours and help to boost those hours for the school as well, so that you are meeting that criteria. This additional support also needs to be in place for at least 3 months. So it's quite good to get that in place as soon as you can before you start doing the trial, so that by the time you submit the application, the child's had the support for at least 3 months. And it can be a mixture of both. So they might be going out for reading recovery, and they could be having some one-to-one support in the class, and it can be a mixture of both as well. And so they don't need a formal diagnosis for any form of assistive tech that we apply for. So that'll be Chromebooks, iPads, C-Pen, headphones, etc. The only thing you do need a diagnosis for is separate forms of technology, such as a speaker or hearing aids to a microphone, and that's when you need some sort of hearing diagnosis or APD. But anything that's to do with other assistive technology, so the iPads, the Chromebooks, etc., you don't need a diagnosis for it, just the additional support. So how do we assess students' needs for assistive technology? This is something that I've been told about, the SET framework, which is by Joy Zabala. She created it in 2007. And so this looks at the student, their environment, what are the tasks they need to complete, and what are the tools that would be a good fit for that student. So let's look at an example of the SET framework with a specific student. So this student is a 9-year-old, they're adventurous, they're interested in technology, they have strong oral language. They're in an urban primary school and they have access to PC computers and iPads already. So therefore we've looked at the student, their environment, which is the S and the E in SET, the tasks, so this is what they're able to do, what they're struggling with. So they are currently decoding at their age level, but with their writing they really struggle with their spelling and with their handwriting. And then their tools, so what are the different tools that maybe we could look at for this child? So maybe a laptop, a Chromebook, an iPad, a tablet. We also need to look at the features of those tools. So are they compatible with what the school's already doing and what you need it to do? Does it have good battery life? Is it able to capture images? Does it record the student's voice? Can it do text to speech, speech to text? Is it robust? Does it have word prediction? How portable is it? Depending on the student's need. And so you can see that within that child's environment, their own needs, you need to think of all the different features that tech could have. And then from that, this is part of the application form. You can look at what does the equipment need to do to support the student's learning goals. So what are the key features of the tool? So in this case, the student needed to have a keyboard to reduce the need of handwriting, because if you remember, we said that the handwriting they were struggling with their handwriting. they can talk into it, have speech turned into text, have things read back to them and dictated, so they can check the accuracy of what they've written. When typing, it needs to provide relevant text predictions to help with the writing, have a camera so that they can include photos in their work, and enable them to continue their handwriting practice, be robust, so be good enough to last a few years in a classroom, have good battery life, so you want it to last all day at school, and easy for the student to get in and out and put away independently. So in this case, we've done a table with the different options. You don't need to do this, but you can see the best one here is probably the iPad, because the only thing that's missing is a keyboard and it being robust, and we can fix those things, or we can get an external keyboard, we can get a case for it. Whereas if you look at a Chromebook, in this instance, it didn't have a front-facing camera, which you can't change, and you couldn't practice handwriting because it wasn't touchscreen. Yeah. And so based on that list, they decided on an iPad. And also, if you'd seen, the school already works with iPads, so that would be taken into consideration as well. What is the child used to? What does a child already know how to use? How are we going to future-proof that for that child? Yeah, so then other options that were considered and why. So in your application, you need to list these things. You need to say what were the other things that you were considering, and why did you decide on an iPad rather than other things, because you need to have strong arguments for that. So laptop was considered, but it wasn't as easy for the student to use. Surface Pro tablet, Windows wasn't, again, as easy for them to use for this particular age student. The Chromebook, the touchscreen was quite expensive compared to an iPad, and it wasn't really used in schools at that time, so it wasn't very relevant to the student, and the teachers didn't really know how to use them either, so they couldn't support the student. So you get the idea around that. So then, if we think about all the things that we needed for that child, the dictation, the read back, text prediction, handwriting, etc., what does it have and what do we need to get? Because you only get the iPad like this, so what are the types of things that we might need? Do we need a pen for it? Do we need a case? So you can see here that we've decided that we will add a case to it, a carry case to carry everything around in. So if it's moving classrooms, going home potentially. There's some software, which I'll talk about in a minute, and a stylus, because one of the key things was that we wanted this child to practice their handwriting. So having a stylus is really important. You don't need Apple pens. They're very expensive, and young students don't need all the things that Apple pens do. You just need a cheap stylus, especially if it's just for practicing handwriting. A really good application for practicing handwriting is Writing Wizard, and it will get approved by the ministry, or it has been approved by our Way of Plenty ministry, because it's not super expensive. It's just $10 and that's it. And it gives them everything they need to practice their letters and the numbers. And yeah, and so in this case, now it should have everything that child needs. It's got the external, what's it called? Keyboard, sorry. And yeah, got the pen, got everything that we now need, and the software. So I'll move on to talk about the software now. So there's lots of different types of software. I mainly know of 3 that I've used so far, and that people I know have used. There's probably a lot more out there that you could look into, but iWordQ is one for the iPad, and that has word prediction, speech to text, text to speech. It has a lot more going on as well, but the word prediction is probably a really important one, and yeah, it does quite a lot, similar to Read and Write. So Read and Write works on Chromebooks and laptops. I know a bit more about Read and Write than iWordQ, in fact. So I know Read and Write, it will show you a picture of words if you don't understand what they are. Instead of a description, it gives you a picture of them. It can also read a description of them to you. It also, I know Read and Write will convert languages. So if it's an ESOL student, it will change the English into their language, which is quite cool too if they're really struggling to understand certain things. So read and write, it will obviously do the speech to text, text to speech. It will, what else does it do? It kind of simplifies everything. So if you're going and doing research, it will take away all the mess around it and adverts and just leave you with the writing. It does quite a lot of interesting things that can be really helpful for students. And I presume iWordQ does something similar. It's just iWordQ is more for an iPad and read and write is more for a Chromebook or a laptop. And then Clicker Writer is more for either younger students or students that are really struggling to access any form of writing. And again, you can do speech to text, text to speech, but with Clicker Writer, a teacher aide or a teacher, somebody will input all the words and they'll have word banks on there, and they can literally just pick the words and make the sentences with the words. And so that's really nice for students that need that, and it will read the word to them before they choose it as well. So it's a little bit more simplified. You can't use it, say, like with Googling or research. So it is better, I suppose, for a younger student. Also to note that the ministry don't pay for reading or maths applications. So things like Reading Eggs, they don't pay for. Only things like the Clicker Writer or, handwriting apps, they will. But so this is a worksheet you can use to go through that set. The student, the environment, the tasks and the tools, what they already have, what they might need. So if you're in a one-to-one device school, you may not need the hardware, you might just need the software, you might just need Read and Write or Clicker Writer, which the ministry can provide. And be aware that if you are in a one-to-one school or a BYO device school, you can't apply for the hardware because technically it's already available to the child. And I recommend sitting down with a teacher to do this, because then you get a real good idea of that child from their perspective, rather than just from what we've seen in those snapshots of time that we've seen them. Also sitting with the child and asking them what they think is really important as well. So there's two examples here of one of a planning sheet and this one here. Both good to kind of sit through with a teacher. This was actually in the PowerPoint from the ministry, and I've got permission to share it, but it's just about noise cancellation. So noise cancelling headphones work best in an environment with a single type of noise, so maybe on an aeroplane or in a car or somewhere where it's just kind of one noise. In a classroom, they don't work quite as well because you've got all these different noises going on. So if you're just looking for something to cancel out noise for a student to make it quieter, then just ear defenders or ear muffs, whatever you want to call them, simple basic ear muffs, ear defenders are the best things you can get in the classroom just to cancel out that noise. Noise cancelling headphones won't cancel it out quite so well in a classroom. So, steps to completing an application. Obviously, you decide which AT is best for the child. You can use SET. Contact, in the Bay of Plenty, Di Edlin is our Ministry of Education assistive technology lady, but obviously you'll find your own one, and any companies that you might need to access the hardware or the software from. So if your Ministry of Education assistive tech person doesn't have the hardware available, then who can you contact to get a trial of that hardware or the software? So with Read and Write, you need to contact the Read and Write team and they will send you out a trial, or Clicker Writer, they'll send you out a trial, and it's usually for 30 days. So you need to really make the most of that 30 days of that trial. They have been quite flexible over COVID, but usually it's only 30 days you get for that trial. So it's really using that time well. Then you need to read through the form with the classroom teacher, and a lot of the time the classroom teacher might not think they have enough time, but actually it's really important they do sit down and read through the form with you, because they'll have a lot of information you don't have. And then gathering the pre-data is really important to get before they even touch the device, because once they've touched that device, their work's going to start improving. So you really need to get that pre-data before and based on goals that you choose, and you have to choose 2 or 3 goals, for the trial. Then you obviously begin your trial, gather your post data at the end of the trial, complete the application form and gather all the signatures. And if it's your first or second trial, it needs to be peer reviewed. So once you've had 2 applications accepted, you don't need to peer review anymore, but for the first 2, you need to find somebody nice in your cluster to peer review it for you, and they need to have had 2 accepted as well before they can peer review for you, which makes sense. And then you send it off to Di in our case, or to your own assistive technology person. So this is what the AT form looks like, and this is the link. It's really important you actually get the link from the ministry website, not just from like the Google Drive, because it could be the old version of the form that's on there, and they update them quite regularly, and you end up, if you submit the wrong form, you have to redo it all completely. So yeah, but the front page of the form basically is just the student's name, anyone that's involved. It's pretty basic, the first part. And then part 3 is asking you to explain the student's learning needs. And whenever it's got max 8 lines, you actually need to stick to that, because I had one sent back to me because they'd gone way over on my word limit, and it has to be within the word limit. They've gained so many applications that they just needed to be to the point, clear and succinct. What curriculum level are they at, and do they expect them to move schools? So a lot of this information, again, you'll get that either from the teacher or the family. And then you choose their learning goals. Again, 2 or 3 goals is great. Part 7, what does the equipment need to do? This is the bit we talked about before. Based on this, what have you decided? Why did you not choose other things? I'll go through an example in a minute. And then these, at the very end of the application form, you've got a list of goals, and you basically choose from these goals, because you can see here that it will give you the data you need to collect for your pre and post trial based on the goals that you choose. And so it's really important to stick to what they've said here, and then it makes it really clear and succinct. And again, I'll show you an example of that soon. So here's an example of one of my students. Year 5-6 student, he struggled with reading and writing throughout primary school, and it was starting to impact his self-esteem. He did many different interventions, none of which helped a lot, and he'd been referred to 3D for possible attention issues. This was his writing in year 6, out of year 6. And you can see he's just struggling to spell, struggling with sentence structures. And you could see it was in his head, he just couldn't get it onto the paper. And so this was at the end of the trial. I think he actually trialled for about 3 months in the end, because of COVID and him being away and the teacher being away. Ended up being quite a while, but you can see the difference that it made. Yeah, even in the 3 months, it wasn't fully 3 months, but yeah, seeds come in all types, they grow at different rates. You can just see even the amount of work and the different types of sentences he's using, and he's got paragraphs and punctuation, and the spelling's correct, and just the confidence you could see from the start to the end was huge. Yeah, so here we go, eligibility. So in this case, additional support. This child was getting the additional support. Explaining the learning needs. So extremely low literacy levels, level 1A on EASTL, along with low phonological awareness, can currently only spell CV and CVC words consistently. Working memory is poor, struggles to hold more than 2 chunks of information. During observations and one-to-one testing showed very short attention span. Family history of ADHD, waiting on 3D. Regular one-to-one time with the teacher. And without AT support, always needs extra support from a teacher for all academic work. And mostly engaged in learning, but we were worried about the well-being and becoming disengaged. So he was working at level 2, which is below where he's supposed to be in year 6, and then wasn't expecting to move schools. So just note that if they're expected to move schools in the next 6 months, you can't apply for assistive tech. You need to wait till they've moved schools. So part 4 is talking about your school and the devices that they've got. So if your school has one-to-one devices, like I said before, you can't apply for the assistive tech. And But if the devices they have at the school are unsuitable, so say it's one-to-one devices and it's Chromebooks, but it's way too hard for the student and you actually want to trial an iPad, you can do that. You just can't trial Chromebooks because they've already got them one-to-one. So in this case, the class only had 5 devices for 30 students, so it was appropriate to trial a Chromebook because he didn't have access to one-to-one. And then you need to describe in detail the extra support that they're having in the classroom and how long they're having the technology for. So in this case, we said there's minimal devices available, and that's why we're trialing this device. And then the amount of time they're having. So this child was having 30 minutes a day of one-to-one TA time. So that already makes up that 2 hours per week. Also getting extra time one-to-one with the teacher, but be careful with using teacher time because they don't really like to count teacher time unless it's very specific, because technically the teacher's going to be giving them their time anyway. So what are the learning areas targeted? In this case, it was mainly literacy, but mathematics as well. And who's providing the support? Again, you want it to be the teacher aide, possibly RTLB might be providing some short-term support, etc. So next, what were our key goals? In this case, we chose to increase the quantity of written work produced in a specific time span and to increase independence in producing written work. And these again are chosen from that list at the bottom of the form. The goals on the list at the back end of the form are all very relevant to the assistive tech you're applying for. You shouldn't need to write goals yourself. Just remember, if you ever did need to write one yourself, make it a SMART goal. It has to be measurable. So this question here, question 6, is you only need to fill it out if the child has already got a one-to-one device and it's no longer fit for purpose. Either it's too old or you need to trial something new because, say, they've grown up and the iPad is just not working for them anymore and they need a Chromebook with read and write on instead. So this is the list of the goals as I showed you before. This was one that we chose, that to increase the quantity of written work produced within a specific time span. So, for example, classroom writing session. And then you can directly quote from these, as I said before. So what does the equipment need to do? Now we move on to what we want it to do. So this is going back to your set. So allow Hayes to have his work read back to him, speech to text, help with editing, have a tool for word banks, for Hayes to be able to speak into the device and have it write out his work, so speech to text, using headphones so he can hear without background noise, a microphone for clarity of speech to text, and a microphone is really important if you're in a busy classroom, make sure that you've got that microphone, a dedicated keyboard so the whole screen is used as a screen. We wanted it to support its comprehension of vocabulary and allow for it to be movable, so a Chromebook. So based on this, we decided on a Chromebook with the touchscreen, the read and write add-on, headphones with a microphone, and we also ended up using a mouse as well, just because that was his preference. So then what other things were considered? So explain, we originally had thought about an iPad, but we figured that, he was actually more comfortable with a Chromebook in the end because they'd been using them in class anyway. And then we considered Clicker Writer, but again, that looks quite young and he was quite worried about being different and being seen as being different. So you need to take that into consideration as well. Whereas Read and Write is just this little add-on that pops up on the screen, and he loved it and got on with it really well. And they actually were showing it to his friends, so it worked out really well in the end. So then we come to the most important part, which is the table for the trial. And you need to make sure you attach your samples of work. So usually it's your pre-trial work and your post-trial work. So photos of the work from before and after. Obviously after it might just be a document that you've downloaded. And really clearly name them so that you can show them in the trial table. So your pre-trial, the tools used probably will be pen and paper or pencil and paper. And then tools used for the post-trial, you have to put your hardware and your software and how long the trial went on for as well. So your data analysis. you have to use, they like you to use quantitative and qualitative measures. So quantitative is the numbers. So how many words per minute, how many sentences, how many numbers of words per sentence, how many sentences in each paragraph, that kind of thing. Things that you can actually directly compare to and from. So in this case, in his pre-trial, he had 80 words in 15 minutes, so 5 words per minute, and in his post-trial he had 185 words in 15 minutes. So you can see it increased by 2.5-fold. And yeah, it had 3 paragraphs rather than the first one, which only had 1 paragraph. And you compare the age expectations and the oral recount. So basically I've taken these and just turned them into little headings so I can directly compare them, and so it's really easy for the person that's assessing this to decide whether they can get it or not. Also at the top, I make sure that I put the title of the post in the pre-trial so they can easily find it when you've attached them, and also explain a little bit about the conditions because you want them to be the same. So 20 minutes to write in the first one, 5 minutes to chat and plan, same with the second one. So it's just making sure that that's very clear as well. So that was the first goal. The second goal was to increase independence in producing written work. So in the first piece of writing, 78% of the words were spelt correctly, but the words were mostly only CVC or CVCC words. Whereas in the post-trial, 100% of the words were spelt correctly, which you'd hope so, with spell checker and all the rest of it on the computer. But he was using a lot more complex words as well. So he was using different, passion fruit, wasting, etc. So a lot more complex vocabulary in there. Also, I talked about whether he needed prompting, how independent he was. So in the first one, he needed a lot of prompting. He ran out of ideas very quickly and he became easily distracted and also quite tired. Whereas in the second piece, he worked very independently, didn't need any support. And he did use the read and write. And it's really important, say if you're trialling read and write, that you don't just use speech to text and text to speech, because you can use that in Google Docs. You don't need read and write. Read and write provides so many different things. A simplify tool where it simplifies all the information so that you've just got the words. It has a picture tool where if you hover over a word you're not sure, it comes up with a picture. It has the prediction tool, so if you're typing a word or you're trying to spell check a word, it will come up with options and read them to you so you can decide which word is best. And that's just a few of the things, but it does so many other things, and you need to make sure that you're showing that they're using those things. Otherwise they might get the device but they might not get the software, and you ideally want them to get both, especially if you've seen it makes a difference. So it's really important in the table to make sure that you're saying he used text-to-speech. He also, when researching on the web, used the picture tool to help him understand words that he didn't understand. You can also add in a bit of this, I've added in student voice as well within the table. So yeah, I really enjoyed using this. I also did an observation because they like to have qualitative data as well. So this was a separate writing session that I observed, and in the first one, the teacher had to give one-to-one support after giving whole class instruction and wrote words on a whiteboard, and then after he'd used up those words, he had to go back and ask for more help. He'd only written maybe a sentence. In the post-trial though, the whole class was set off on a task. He went and got his laptop and he just got on with it. He used the prediction tool. He used the read back tool to listen to his sentences and edit. And you could just see his confidence had grown a lot. And so I just made sure I included that in there as well. So then at the end, it asks you for other comments. So maybe from the teacher or from the student. Make sure there's no new information in these comments. All of the information relating to the success of the software and the hardware need to be in that table. However, these comments can support it. So you can see the teacher said, the more he uses his AT device, the more he enjoys literacy and the more he feels successful. Gone from a kid who struggled to write 10 words in a session, now he can write all day and feels confident in that. And then he also said himself what his best parts were, and then it made him feel more confident when he reads and writes. Doesn't feel like he needs to ask the teacher for help as much anymore. So reading comments like that as well, it's just really lovely to see the confidence that's come through in them. The last part is that you need to get quotes. So if you have done a trial and used, say, an RTLB iPad, you need to get a quote for an iPad from, say, Noel Leeming or PB Tech, and include that on here, and include the paper that has the actual quote on it, so we can actually purchase it. Same with, say, Read and Write add-on, you need the quote from the text help people and attach that to the form. If it's from the ministry, you just need to provide the number that should be on the device or on whatever it is they've given you, and what it is, so the ACE crime book. The rationale, so things like the carry bag, you wouldn't have really mentioned that anywhere why we needed a carry bag in the form. So just make sure here you write, so to keep safe when transporting between spaces. Logi headset for speech to text in different environments. Yeah, so I just make sure I add a little rationale there for the things that maybe don't already have a very clear rationale anywhere else. And yet it has to be including GST. So if your quotes come without GST, you just have to use a little GST calculator online and figure that out. And put your total costings here. Then this is just very basic, deciding who will be responsible for monitoring it, how it will be kept safe, whether it stays at school the whole time or goes home. And you need to discuss that with the teacher and with the parents. That's not really up to us to decide, it's up to the school, because the school are the ones that are responsible for this. The school are the ones that are responsible for deciding what happens to it in 6 months and if it's still working and getting it fixed and getting it changed, etc., etc. You actually need to nominate somebody to look after the device. It's usually the Senko in the school. And so, yeah. And then obviously you need to get your permissions. And I'd try and get these not like 2 days before the application's due. Get them a bit earlier on, maybe when you're starting the trial, when you know that the trial's going well, maybe just then go get you need to get permission from the principal of the school and from the parents. And then obviously once you've finished your application, you need to get that peer review as well. Applications are always due on the first Tuesday of each month, and they're only open from February to November. So generally in term 4 we don't really do trials because there's not really enough time to get them in unless you've started it in term 3 and you're putting it in October. And then, yeah, you've got your peer review there as well. And there's a nice little checklist at the bottom as well. This is a checklist which I've created. So yeah, it just runs through all the key things that you'll need, and I just found it to be quite good to follow myself, and just to keep me on track because these can be quite big applications. So yeah, just helping you to keep on track. This slide has the key information for Di Edlin, who is our MOE contact. She's amazing. You can call her, you can email her, and she will get back to you really quickly with any questions, even if you think they're silly. I've asked her so many questions about these applications and she's been amazing. Yeah, I can't speak for any of the other ones, but I know that she's really, really good. And yeah, so she's the first point of contact if you want to trial technology and if you're looking for the hardware to trial. And yeah, you can also email her your application and she'll check it for you, especially if you're past the peer review point, but you're not quite feeling super confident yet. She'll have a check over and just give you any hints and tips if you need them. Lastly, here are a few contacts for quotes. So again, this is specific to the Bay. The Noel Leeming one is that's who we contact in Tauranga. Daniel, I can't pronounce his last name, but yep, Daniel from Noel Leeming. He will give you a nice quote for Chromebooks, iPads, etc. And then the software, there's a C.Rope, I think that's Cameron from Text Help, and that's for the read and write quotes. And then Clicker Writer is somebody called Tyler. I don't have a contact for iWordQ yet, but I can add that when I get one. And that is the end of hopefully some helpful information about assistive technology applications. And yes, so thank you everyone. Kia ora.